Gaming Podcast, episode number 2. Here we are again with Dan. Our special guest. This is part 2. Thanks for coming back. This is sort of like the part 2, like when you get the sequel, you know, that picks up seconds after the first movie.
Yeah.
It's just like that.
That's the best way to have it. It's like a whole movie in a row. What do you know?
So this is, we're filmed on September 25th, 2024. Tonight's episode, we're going to be doing recent or sometimes not so recent news. We're going to be talking about a local con that I went to. A little bit of meta talk. We'll answer some questions from emailed listeners. Listeners have emailed. We'll talk about some games that we've been recently playing. And and that's going to be the episode tonight. But to start off, I love the whole gamification of everything. Do you do that in your life? Do you gamify things?
Not really, to be honest with you. I game so much that gamifying the rest of my life would be tough for me.
That makes sense.
So yeah, I'm a go with the flow kind of person, and so I'm not OCD, and I don't really need to gamify everything. Although I will say, if I do, I tend to focus on things a little better. So maybe I do a little bit. I don't know.
So this is a I saw this meme which I thought was really kind of funny. It was sort of like a bet. You lose the bet, and this is what happens. You have to. The rules are simple. This is quoting this meme. You have to stay at Waffle House for 24 hours, and for each waffle you eat, 1 hour is deducted off the total time. The start time is 8:20 a.m. How many waffles do you think you're eating? Are you going to live your whole day? You put one of your days of your life at Waffle House?
Man, waffles are a tricky animal, and the first one is amazing, right?
Yep.
The second one, probably not so much. In fact, it probably is getting pretty bad. And then the third one would just be, maybe 3?
3, so 21 hours. You're spending 21 hours in that Waffle House.
Oof, that's rough.
What do you think, listening here? Do you think, how many waffles do you think you're consuming to limit the time that you're spending?
They also only take about 5 minutes to consume, so the actual eating of them isn't really taking much time up either.
No, it's pretty quick, yeah. And it's like pancakes, where you can't eat a lot of pancakes either.
You really can't. Pancakes, yeah.
So we're going to start with a little bit of news here. I had saw that there is this, AI. Okay, AI a little bit. We started off last episode talking a little about the reviewer scandal, and AI is sort of something that's a big news in our world today, right? This is 2024, closing out the year, and I think one of the biggest news stories is AI, and it affects everything and everybody, right? So, it's gotten into the board gaming space, and this is something that people have started to kind of have an opinion on and stuff, and that certain game companies have been disclosing. I think if you do a Kickstarter, you have to disclose whether you use any AI art or any
art. At GAMA this year, the Game Manufacturers Association, they did a kind of a symposium that we got to go to. One of the seminars was on AI in games.
Oh yeah, that's fascinating.
And I really probably shouldn't have been there because it was more from the production side.
Okay,
it was actually for a lot of the people who run the game companies and who are the developers for these board games. But it was actually fascinating to watch. And they did mention that there are a lot of hoops you need to jump through. Mm-hmm. And they even kind of went into is this an ethical way to put art into your games, and how far do you go with it? And there was a lot there. So it's definitely on the forefront of a lot of people's minds. That's for sure. I mean, I don't even know if I should have been in that one because I don't build games myself, but it's a lot of people are talking about it, and especially in the industry.
So this is from Polygon.com. As his Kickstarter passes 1.3 million, and we're going to put this linked in below, publisher defends to Terraforming Mars' generative AI art. It's too powerful a technology. But before I go with that, I should also say, we did a little intro for you on our last episode, so I didn't want to go through that again, but your unique perspective on this is kind of what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Often because of your, just the quick highlight is that you're a manager at a game shop.
Yeah.
You've been doing that for quite a long time, so that's a unique
you get to
perspective.
see the retail side of the industry a lot.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. So I should have said that earlier. Now, what's interesting, so I'm just going to explain something, because, AI is this big deal. Most people know about it and stuff, but, I don't know if you had a lot of experience in dealing with it, but, I don't. Okay, but a friend of mine, he does a lot of stuff with the AI art, and and I went over to his house, and he was like, I want to show you something. And he was like, he put in a few prompts. He was like, werewolf, pulp art, book cover, oil painting. And then I'm like watching the meter's like,
bam,
boom.
Gives it right to you.
And there's, it's like, mind blowing. Like, I could not believe it. It looked incredible. It was it's hard to ignore a powerful tool like that. Now,
it's definitely like you can tell sometimes. Maybe it almost feels like it was 6 months or a year ago when you would go to these prompts and you'd see this AI art. It was just you could tell it was AI art.
Yeah.
It was almost like it didn't breach the uncanny valley. But now, like just like you said, 4 words got you this like exactly what you were imagining. Yeah. It's almost scary. It's not gonna be slowing down, I don't think.
So what's fascinating to me now, on our last episode we talked about a little bit about the LCGs and stuff. And Fantasy Flight is a great kind of company to talk about this because, I think art in board gaming, obviously the production costs are their own things. But like, aside from that, the biggest, expense in making a game has got to be the art. It's exceedingly expensive.
Yeah.
Now, Fantasy Flight, as I said, we were kind of chatting about the LCGs last episode. That was a huge expense for them to create that art, and Fantasy Flight would get certain IPs, like, so let's say they have the Star Wars IP. They'd have a bunch of art made for, they had a Star Wars LCG for a while. They use that same art when they do Rebellion. They use, they add different pieces, but like, they're recycling all that art for cards.
Yeah, their RPG,
for RPG,
all kinds of stuff. Yeah.
Their Rebellion, what's the miniatures line they have? Shatterpoint, and what's the other one?
Oh, Legion.
Legion, that's the other one, yeah. So, I mean, they're reusing a lot of that art. And, of course, they're adding some new one. But, I mean, like, they're we talked about Lord of the Rings before, when the sales were dropping off for that, and they were considering whether to do a last cycle, which, oh, my God, I'm amazed. And thank you that they did it, because it was really incredible for us fans. But one of the reasons they decided to do that was because of... they were coming out with the Journeys in Middle-earth, which was the base game, and then 2 real big box expansions. And they probably wouldn't have, if they weren't going to be able to reuse all that art for that stuff, they might not have done that. And so I think it's such a huge expense for a company. Now, Fantasy Flight is very big in the gaming industry, but you can see why some of these other games should do it. So, where do you think you've come down on? Do you think people should be doing the AI, not doing? I mean, it's a pretty kind of a hot take for you, really.
It's a hot take for me, to be honest. Like, just as a snap reaction to someone who plays a lot of games, but also really loves fantasy art, really loves sci-fi art, I am enthralled with what the AI can do, but also I have loved the fantasy art and sci-fi art of the past, and I think when you take the artist out of it, like, it just feels kind of bad, I guess. I don't know. It's just kind of like a feeling you get. It's like you look at it, you're like, wow, that's so cool. But your brain doesn't automatically think, oh, someone came up with that. That's what's that is what's intriguing about a lot of art to me. It's like, how did someone come up with that? Yeah. And even when artists began using computers to make art a lot, I mean, that might have been the same reaction. Like, maybe there was an artist who does oil painting, and, that was like, oh, you're using a computer? That's not real art. Well, now we're in this place where it's like, oh, you know how to prompt an AI? That's not real art. So... who knows? This technology is kind of just getting to that point where it's like, it's around, and I don't think it's going anywhere.
So what's fascinating to me a little bit is, that this, I read this title here for this, the Indie Game Studios defense of their Terraforming Mars use of this, and I'm like, it's so funny to me. It's like ironic because. I mean, what's more it's like yawn, like Terraforming Mars's art is so
it's
like blah, like it's
basically like some spacemen.
It's so funny to me because it's like it's like a scandal or a little bit of a scandal over this thing that's like, not really anybody's favorite art. Are you a player of Terraforming Mars? Are you?
Love the game. It's fantastic.
Yeah. One interesting thing I want to bring up too about FFG, and it's kind of a little question for you. A little, what do you think kind of question. So what would you do? Is that, I think it's 5 years is the number, but if you work, this about Fantasy Flight? If you have worked for Fantasy Flight for 5 years, you get your art in a game somewhere.
Like your face?
Yeah, so there's a card, I'll put it on the screen here, that the designer, one of the longest term designers of Lord of the Rings, the card game, got his art on a card. He picked the card it was going to be, and he picked the artist that it was going to be, and so that's his art and his face on there. So sometimes if you see a prominent face, like that might be somebody that's like the guy that
wasn't his face on like a really unknown character.
Well, his was on Thalion, which you can see on the screen now, which is a neutral ally who can become a hero. It's actually a great card. It's a really fascinating little card.
Nice.
And he really likes the side schemes in that game, so it kind of synergizes with side schemes. So my question is, what do you get? What IP that they, or any, I guess I'll open up to any IP. Let's pretend Fantasy Player can get any IP you want.
What would I want my face to be on? Man, that's a great question. I think it would probably have to be, I would say maybe like a Marvel superhero, like an unknown Marvel superhero would be fun. Like maybe in Marvel Champions or something. Marvel vs. Zombies, that'd be great. I'm looking at that right now. I'm like, I want to be a superhero, but a zombified superhero, and that would be pretty sweet.
That's good. You want to be a hero, not a villain?
Yeah. I would probably want to be. I would want to be like an unknown superhero kind of.
Yeah, I mean, but to bring it back around, I mean, you can see why this. I mean, it's funny because we've talked quite a bit on the past 2 episodes here about the size of this industry, and you can see the appeal in saving money and stuff. But I think on the same hand, like people that do work in the industry that are really good artists. Now, last episode we talked about Jekyll and Hyde, and we talked about the new Jekyll and Hyde game. And that Jekyll and Hyde game, like Vincent Jutrade, is a very maybe the most popular board gaming artist right now.
Yeah,
probably for a good reason. But that really brings you to the table. Like people you see that. And that's really exciting for people. I think, on BGG last couple of days, at this recording, the Lord of the Rings trick-taking game is coming out. And that art, it's like that stained glass art for the characters, the hobbits and stuff. I mean, that's drawing a lot of people to the...
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, honestly, like, even just on the cover of your board game, it doesn't even have to be on the bits in the game. Like, the cover of your board game can really capture and sell the game. It, we call it shelf presence because it is, you look at it, you say, oh, that's so cool. It snaps your interest right away. It has you actually pick the thing up, turn it around, look at the game, that type of thing. And so the art on games is incredibly important in terms of getting it sold. I don't know if we are going to get trained enough with our eye to be like, oh, that's just some AI art. It looks cheap to me. I don't know if that is something that we've quite caught up with yet, or if AI is just going to get so good, you just won't be able to tell.
So, I mean, I think the big concern for AI and stuff is for like artists is that they're going to be put out of a job.
No doubt.
And I don't think like Vincent Jutrade, I think he's big now. People want him. He's probably booked forever. Like everybody's thinking
maybe. But think about it: if he's that good and that expensive, any little company who said, "Well, we really want him, but like we could save X amount of dollars because." You just do it this way.
Well, yeah. My point is that like maybe he gets work still, but the other artists that aren't as big,
maybe
they probably don't get any more work, which is tough. Like so, Kickstarter here, you have to disclose that, otherwise they probably would not have said that. I mean,
no doubt.
I would get.
It wouldn't
so
be even a thing.
Let me ask you this: so you love Terraforming Mars? Are you not going to back it because it's AI art?
I mean, I'm not going to back it because I might get it when it comes to my store.
Right, that's true.
But if I was going to back it, that would not be a determining factor for me. Honestly, like, the art needs to look amazing in general. Like, am I the type of person who, like, does look at the game box for who made it and who did the art on it? It depends. That usually gets brought up to me. Or if it's a line of games that I really like, I'll know who made it. But honestly, I'm not going to probably look at the artist. I'm going to look at the art, and if it looks amazing, it's probably going to grab my attention.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the most important thing. Maybe not ethically, philosophically, I don't know, but it is what it is, I think.
So kind of keeping this going with this small industry discussion, it's funny we keep coming. This is such a cyclical couple of episodes because we keep bringing up the same people. I just talked about Jamie Stegmaier in the last episode and how I'm fascinated by numbers, and by money and income and stuff, and like I'm the kind of guy that looks at a business and says like, how is that business open? I'm like, because I figure I'm like, you got to figure this is the red, this is the so it's very fascinating to me to look at numbers and things like that. And of course, most businesses don't want to tell you what they're doing, what kind of numbers there are, stuff. But really interestingly, Jamie Stegmaier had put out like a video and a disclosure of like some of his big games, like Scythe and Wingspan. Those are two of the biggest games, sold two of the most copies.
No doubt.
And it's really fascinating to see those numbers and stuff like that. I think that's really, really fascinating. I wish, I understand why game companies don't do that, but it's one of those things where like, I'm always very interested in that sort of thing. And like, I think of this as such a small hobby, but here's what really fascinating is I was kind of curious. I was thinking about replaying some of the Pandemic Legacies. And again, that's so weird because we just talked about that too.
Yeah.
It's such a cyclical thing here. But I'm going to do a little quiz for you here because if you go on Amazon, I was kind of curious. I was like, because I was trying to remember how much was it Pandemic Legacy? I was like, I think it was about $70, and it turns out I am a little off. It was $90. Mm-hmm. But on Amazon, and now this isn't counting like all of these other avenues of games, the game shops, the bigger online retailers for board gaming, etc. And this is Pandemic Legacy Season 1 is an older game, but I just looked this up. I don't know, a couple months ago. And it tells you like how many were bought in the last month, right? Which is really interesting. And now Amazon uses this as a tool to say, hey, we sold 600 of this.
Yeah, this is
cup,
enough,
so it's probably worth you getting type of thing. Yeah. Okay, so how many? This is a little trivia for you. How many copies of Pandemic Legacy Season 1 do you think were sold in the past month? So this is within the last few months, right? For 1 month on Amazon.
Is this worldwide or nationally?
It's just on the U.S. site.
The U.S. site. Oh man, I don't know.
I mean, there's no
5,000.
You think 5,000 copies?
Maybe.
That seems crazy high to me.
Is it high?
So it says 7. I mean, I don't know. It says 700 bought in the last month.
Oh, you said in the last month. Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was like first of the year. I was thinking, still, maybe 1,000. Yeah.
But 700 in the last month. That's an insanely high number to me. And I think, Pandemic Season 0 is 300.
Month, yeah.
And Season 2, I don't have Season 2, sorry. Really kind of interesting to me, like that, they're still selling like 700, and that game is like, 10 years old now? Something like that? It's
close to 10 years, yeah. I mean, that was pretty much the first legacy game that came out, and then
certainly
many others spawned from it.
Yeah. And again, like, they must have sold more when it was first out. I mean, like, if you were to say it sold as many now as it did in the past, 700 times, let's just make our math a little easier, let's just say 7,000 copies a year. Mm-hmm. That's 70,000 copies. That's like way more. I keep saying small industry, but that's a lot of games.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was number one on Board Game Geek for a while.
Oh, yeah. It's the number one legacy game of all time, probably.
Is it? It's been displaced now, though. What's number one now?
I'm not sure.
Oh, Gloomhaven. Gloomhaven, I think, is the number one spot.
Yeah, I'll give Gloomhaven.
It was Twilight Struggle.
Sure, yeah.
No, I mean as the number one on Board Game Geek.
Sure.
Number one game.
Yeah,
it was Twilight Struggle, and then Pandemic Legacy edged it out, and then I think Gloomhaven knocked that off of the top spot. But kind of just an interesting thing there. Sticking a little bit with this, I saw this other article, Card Playing Robot. This is about the AI and stuff too, a little continuation. Card Playing Robot has Raspberry Pi brain and 3D printed arm. This guy, and you'll see it on the screen here now, he designed this little robot arm and he gave it intelligence to play, right? Now there is
get one of these in my shop.
I mean, it's fascinating. So for me, as like a solo gamer, predominantly solo gamer, like, this is amazing. Now, Cool Mini or not, and I cannot for the life of me remember the name of the table, but they have, it's like, I can't remember, but it's a table, a smart table. You roll dice. Mm-hmm. Have you seen this?
I think so, yeah.
They had a Kickstarter for it. And, it senses what's in the die, and it knows the numbers, and it tells you where to move things and stuff like that. Monsters, they have, of course, the Homicide is their big game, so they have that. They have a game specifically made for this, but it isn't for every game. But you can see it like Tabletop Simulator could be a very useful tool for solo gamers or for any kind of gamer. But this guy had made this, of course, we're years away from, having AI like truly be in your home as a competitive, what do you think about that?
Something you play against.
Yeah.
If I could have a robot with the intelligence of another like TCG card player, then I would be a much better card player. I know that.
So because
then you could just
practice?
Jam games anytime. But what happens now is, like you said, you go on like game sims where you're either playing against somebody else or you're playing the computer or whatever. It's a thing, but having the physical AI in the home just so you can play board games, That's a can of worms right there.
That's the dang, 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 dang.
Literally have Terminator right behind me.
Yeah,
Look at this right now.
yeah.
See, I think you set this up this way.
Dang, 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 dang.
Yeah, I'm a little worried about that. But
So I just rewatched Terminator 2. You're a fan of the movies?
absolutely. Terminator 2 might be in my top 10 favorite of all time.
Is that right?
Oh my god.
I like the first one better, but I do think
It's one of my favorite action movies ever, for sure.
For sure. And it's interesting because I just rewatched. This is a spoiler alert for Terminator. But you know, like the whole. I mean, of course, you remember the ending. Like he has to. They killed the T-1000, and then he's like, "You got to kill me too, even though I don't know why you cry." You know, and he has to be killed, and because he has to destroy the other CPU. And I've seen it from obviously the movie 25 times in my life or
At
something.
least, yeah. I'm
And
20.
I never noticed this before, but his arm gets ripped off in an earlier scene, like when he's fighting.
Yeah.
But I never realized. I'm like, wait a minute, they didn't destroy that arm. So I wonder, like, did they put that arm in there so they could bring it back for a sequel?
They did.
Did they in 3?
Not in 3.
In another one?
In one, and another one.
Another one. Interesting. I've only seen 3 in the theater. That was enough for me.
It might have been in. Was it in 3? I don't know. They definitely bring an arm back.
Okay.
They definitely use that as a tool.
It's funny because I never really noticed it. Again, I only saw 3 in the theater, and
I love 1. And 1 is totally different than 2. I love 2. 3 was just okay. Most of the rest of them are not good.
Yeah. So speaking of, now this is a real big tangent here, so bear with me. It has nothing to do with gaming. But Batman is, Batman and Batman Returns, you know? Mm-hmm. So I rewatched those a couple of days ago, maybe sometime in the last 2 weeks. But, like, I never noticed this before, or I never really thought about it before, but, you know, because I saw it when I was a kid, and you get these memories about it, and you don't really, you know.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, but Batman, one of Batman's big things is, what's his big rule?
He doesn't kill people.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in Batman, he kills people constantly.
Yeah,
he's like, see you later, you're going off that cliff. And it's not even like, oh, I know, like, you're a pedophile or you're a murderer.
He doesn't shoot people.
No, he throws them off a building. But it's not like he's like, okay, I can see that you're a murderer or something. It's like, this guy could just be a small town hood. And he's you're going off this building.
Sure.
And he puts a bomb in somebody's pants. He lights somebody on fire with a Batmobile. And they burn to death. It's so insane to me.
It's Tim Burton's take.
It's very, very funny.
That's funny.
All right, getting a little bit more on track here. And this is not so much board gamer, but it's definitely tabletop gamer. But it's fascinating to me. Now, you're probably tired of hearing about this because it's such a big topic for game shops and people just know this. But it's so fascinating to me that Magic the Gathering, Magic the Gathering and D&D are bigger than they've ever been. Right?
Absolutely.
Which is crazy to think about also, right? But Magic the Gathering also is keeping gaming shops alive. Do you think that's true?
Keeping gaming shops alive. It is hard for most shops to thrive without the income Magic brings in.
It's so crazy.
I'll say it that way.
Yeah.
There are shops that do not do Magic.
Yeah.
But they are generally board game focused shops, and their income stream and the way that they do business is just completely different. You know, it really is. Having TCGs is kind of a backbone in order to have quick revenue and a lot of income and have a lot of events that can cycle through a lot of customers. TCGs do that better than really anything.
So
I think that's more. I'm not going to say that you have to have it if you have a game shop, you have to have Magic the Gathering. I know a lot of places that I've been to that won't even touch it because it's just not the philosophy the way they want to do their business.
Well, it definitely brings in a different crowd.
Yes, and
there's crossover for sure, but it's
for sure.
We started talking about this at the shop the other day when I saw you, and I was like, we started kind of chatting about this subject, and I was just like, hold up.
Yeah.
I want to talk about this a little bit because it's the idea now. If you don't know, Magic the Gathering historically, I played. I mean, the game's been around 25 years, 30 years now.
It had its 25th about 3 years ago, so it's almost at 30.
Okay, almost at 30 years, and I played for a very long time. I haven't played for 20 years now or something. It's been a while, so. It would have like two sets come out a year or so, something like that, right? And it's a big set would come out. And, it was mainly, it was like kind of like this fantasy world. And, I never really knew the characters and things. They had books and things, but, it was like, okay, there's monsters, there's big fantasy type monsters, there's wizards, there's that sort of thing, there's knights and things like that.
Goblins.
And now what's kind of happened.
Elves and stuff,
all the same, the tropes that you might, and now they have all these sets coming out. First of all, they have a lot more sets coming out a year, right?
Yes. There are a lot of sets, and they have in-betweeners, and they'll have a special thing here, and a reprint set here, and they'll do a lot,
Yeah, they've really figured out how to milk the cash cow.
Yes, so I mean, they have kind of like, they're going to have what we call a core set that's kind of like we call it the standard set. They have, I think, 4 of those a year. But you're probably going to have a new set or pack that you can buy come out almost every month.
That's insane to me. So the thing I wanted to talk about you a little bit was that the idea, and this is kind of like a more general gaming concept to me, which is why I think it's a little more interesting for this this thing, is that you have a game you have a game like Smash Up, right? And the idea is like, here's sharks, it's ninja sharks, or it's like, kittens, robots, it's all this different set of stuff. But Magic always had a feeling of magic, a fantasy world. But now one of the ways that they're making a lot of money and getting a lot of fans is by taking on these IPs, like they did a Doctor Who set. They did a Transformers set. They did a Lord of the Rings set, which actually made me think for a moment about like, should I get into it? And I was like, no, can I?
Lord of the Rings was one of the most popular of all time, by the way.
So it's fascinating to me that like, it's like this whole thing of you're losing your identity as a fantasy world. Like I'm like, okay, I'm going to play my dragon. All right, I'm going to play Optimus Prime and, Captain America, and I'm going to put Doctor Who and Frodo Baggins. and you sort of lose the sense of what the game is kind of, it loses its identity to some degree. But of course, as you just said, that was a very popular set. People, and I could get, Lord of the Rings because it's also fantasy based. Okay, you kind of see that. But these other IPs, but you kind of have, go give your take on it.
Okay, well, the fact of the matter is, Wizards of the Coast used to be its own thing.
Yeah.
It was bought by Hasbro. Hasbro has a lot of IPs that they can push.
Yeah.
People recognize a lot of the things that they know. Transformers is Hasbro. You name it. They have tons of IPs that they do for their toys, that they do for movies, that they do for a ton of stuff. And they're coming out with a Marvel set.
Yeah, that's crazy.
They're coming out with the Marvel set, I think, next year. And they have all this. They already have all these IPs, and so they changed their philosophy when they bought WotC, and that's when this started happening. Really, it was just the type of thing where, yes, when it was Wizards of the Coast, you kind of followed like some main characters, and then right around like the 2010s, you started following these planeswalkers who had their own kind of linear story. Every single set that would come out would be kind of them on their adventures doing stuff. It's really that now they've gone to different types of worlds. They've gone to different types of IPs. Like they just did one where you're in like your small woodland creatures in, a woodland setting, and that's kind of a standard set. But then, of course, they did Assassin's Creed right after that, and then they just came out with is a terrifying horror one, and so like they're kind of trying everything. They're doing the shotgun approach, and I think, they're not going to stop doing it because it is bringing people in. Like tons of people gravitated who would never have picked up Magic before, gravitated towards it because they did this cutesy little creature one. And then when the Lord of the Rings one came out, people like yourself are like, man, I just might have to get into this.
As a gamer, you can identify that. You think of yourself like, this is a mistake. I'm seeing this mistake and I might be making it.
Right. And so even myself, I'm like, oh, this is one of the coolest things they've done in a long time. The art's amazing. All this stuff I remember from the books. I'm going to collect every card in the set. And then I get about halfway and I'm like, okay, no longer. But
so this, okay. So when you have like a business or whatever, and I kind of remember I used to, when I was like 15, I had a job, like at a coffee shop, cafe type of thing. And I remember my cousin owned this shop, which is how I got the job or whatever. But, she's supposed to be like this vegetarian restaurant, right? Like this cafe thing. And then something would start selling in the cafe and she's like, oh, well, that's selling really well. Let's start carrying a lot more of that. But the thing is, like, without a mission statement, this store just kind of keeps changing.
Sure.
You could realize, hey, we're selling a lot of energy drinks. Now we're just going to sell energy drinks. Well, now you're no longer the store that you kind of set out to be. And even though so, I kind of feel like Magic is doing just that, and where it's like losing kind of its. And again, I have no dog in the fight because I don't.
See what you're saying. Yeah.
Horse in the race or whatever you want to say. But it seems like a better approach to me would be like, you do a Transformer set. But that set is kind of self-contained. It doesn't bleed over into the other. Well,
so it's interesting because they're not doing all of these as sets per se. So like the Doctor Who was a super special thing, but it was a set, but it was just some decks.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can get like these collector boosters that you can add to the decks, and they have some like really like collectible cards in them. The same thing is true with the Assassin's Creed. Like these sets, you can't play them in the standard version of the game.
Right.
You can play them in Commander, where it's like more of the multiplayer version and all this stuff. The Transformers thing, they just kind of added Transformers into a set.
Oh, really?
It's like you could just get these random cards in these collector's boosters. And so they didn't do a Transformers set. But with that being said, they are doing a fully Marvel set.
Yeah.
The Lord of the Rings was a full set. So they're kind of picking and choosing what they're going to use these IPs for, whether they're just going to slot them in as cool things that will push the standard sets they're selling, but they're also kind of doing, well, it's Marvel, so we have to do a big one. Well, it's Lord of the Rings, we have to do the full one.
Oh, the bigger, yeah.
So they're making their choices doing that. The long story short is, and my perspective as a longtime Magic player, it has soured it a little bit, just in terms of, playing Optimus Prime against, Doctor Who is just kind of seems silly to me.
Yeah.
But also from the, gamer side, or like the game store side and the financial side of it, because I buy and sell these cards all day, I think adding that kind of cool collectability is really what they're going for.
Yeah.
They're going for, you love this IP,
Sure.
You're going to buy this and try to collect them all because you are just into this. We're going to go for those people, and everyone else will either get rid of those cards to trade for others, or they'll keep them because they might be valuable, or that. I mean, the philosophy has certainly changed. Like, there's no doubt about it.
So, I mean, you can see, I was Dominion, very popular board game. I was in the other day, and you guys have a whole show. I mean,
many. Yeah.
I couldn't, because I kind of started losing track of it. I knew.
Yeah.
I knew. Remember when there was six or seven?
Over 20 of them. Yeah.
I cannot believe it. And I'm thinking to myself, I know the collectors, the real, the completionists are buying everything.
Completionists for sure. Yeah.
But I'm like, man, the combos and everything, and I can see, I can understand, I'm going to get this box, and we're just going to play this as a whole new experience. So I get that, if you enjoy that. Much like, you understand how to play, you just get the new system or whatever.
Oh, that's a cool new card there. There's a cool mechanic that they changed.
But mixing them all in seems impossibly crazy to me.
There's a whole website just for that.
It's nuts. And the other thing is, I'm also amazed at the mechanisms, we're going to keep doing these mechanisms, which Magic has been coming out with so many sets and stuff. And I'm like, how are they keeping it fresh?
They will have,
it's crazy.
They will have 2 to 3 new mechanics in every set.
It's crazy.
And, the core rules of the game kind of always stick. But you like any TCG, the cards come out and some of them just have a lot of text on them. And, they all have weird ways they interact, and you really just have to know the game in order to really kind of put together all the mechanics together.
Now, this is becoming a crowded space. Now, Magic was kind of always the big dog. There were people.
Still is,
there
but
were.
it always has.
There was always kind of be these little competitors that try to get a foothold, but they've ultimately faded away and stuff. But now we've got Lorcana came out, and that's huge. And I saw Fantasy Flight was going all in on this Star Wars Unlimited.
Yep.
And I was and I remember thinking to myself, there's no way this game is gonna flop, because there's just who's gonna. I mean, there's already so much Star Wars so many Star Wars games out there, and also so much different other options for LCGs.
Yeah.
But it's huge.
The jury's still out on that one, to be honest with you.
Oh, you think so? Because didn't they sell out the whole first run or something?
That happens with every TCG.
Yeah,
so we talk about this when we decide whether we're going to really support a game. You always go heavy in on the first, because everyone is going to want to try it, get into the hype.
That makes sense.
They think it's going to be the Pokemon phenomenon where I might if I get in on the first run, these will be worth $1 billion in 20 years.
Yeah, that's interesting.
The second, you always kind of you really watch whether it tapers off or not, or whether the production can keep up. The supply and demand. You can't have too much supply.
Yeah.
If you have too much supply, no one wants the game.
That's so fascinating.
And so they're in a pretty good spot here. It's definitely still, we have a lot of people playing it. People are interested in the game. The game is pretty good in my opinion. But yeah, the jury's still out. With only having 2 sets out, it's really hard to tell whether that will be
the second
one
set
of the big
just came out?
Probably about not quite a month ago, 3 weeks ago maybe. So, the jury's still out on that one. But yeah, I mean...
Have you played it?
I played it, yeah.
And you love Lorcana, though.
I do love Lorcana. It's been, since it came out, it's been the main kind of trading card game I've played, kind of alongside Magic and some of the others. But yeah, I mean, me and my girlfriend are able to play it together. She really enjoys it. It's got a very diverse player group, which is really cool to see.
I don't know too much about it now, other than that it's a living or a collectible game. But I mean, you're playing Mickey Mouse and Captain America and
no. So
the core.
And I really hope they don't go that angle, because exactly what we're talking about, getting back to this throwing in IPs, if Lorcana does that, it will sully the game, similar to how they're doing with Magic.
So the only characters in it are like
Disney, classic Disney. Yeah.
But there's only so many.
There's a lot, dude.
Really?
It's not just classic. I mean, you have like some of the more modern ones. You have like Moana. You have like the modern stuff too. But you have Disney animation. Disney animation is what you have. You have the Disney movies.
I just thought about what I want to do. I just want to play against players and kill. Can I be like fire that kills Bambi's mom?
They haven't put Bambi in there yet.
Bambi's not in there.
No,
Do you remember
Bambi's
that as a kid? Watching that was just
that's terrifying.
Terrifying to me. But I'm like, now I want to be the fire. I want to knock out somebody's game.
And do Dragonfire and kill pretty much anything.
Is that right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, no, they it's actually interesting because like you can play other different ways, and we do a league every week for that particular game. We do that same thing for Magic, Pokemon, all this stuff, but in Lorcana, you can play just the way you play Constructed. You kind of take the two of the 6 colors you can play, and you smash them together, and you find your best deck, and you play. We've actually switched it up, and we're just doing a fun way to do it. We call it franchise format.
Okay.
And that's the way that you just take 2 of the franchises
that
are...
up?
I made it up, yeah.
Interesting.
You take 2 of the franchises that are in the game, and you have 40 cards from one of them and 20 cards from the other, and now instead of using 2 colors, you use 2 franchises with any of the colors. So it kind of opens up a lot of the cards you can play.
Interesting.
But long story short is, if they add new IPs into this and they try to do Star Wars in Lorcana, if they try to do Marvel in Lorcana or whatever else Disney has as an IP, which there are a lot of that some people don't even know, it would sully the game. Yeah. I honestly, it would lose all of its charm.
Huh, that's interesting.
And it's the very same way that Magic.
So my whole point was
no doubt. And so like, I really hope they don't. I really hope they don't. The one thing that they did add in, where I can see this happening, and I'm totally fine with this, was originally we weren't sure if they were going to have any Pixar movies.
Okay.
Well, they just announced that they're going to add Pixar.
Which I think kind of...
it fits. I'll take it.
You're playing Woody and Buzz Lightyear.
Dude, if I'm going to get Woody and Buzz Lightyear in this game, I'm totally happy. However, it does kind of feel like that is a little bit adjunct of the classic Disney animation.
Absolutely.
So maybe Lorcana will have Marvel characters in it in 5 years. Maybe Disney sells Marvel and Star Wars in 5 years. One can only hope. But.
So I have just a almost done with the Magic and living card games, but I do think it has a lot of impact in the
Oh yeah, it's the thing I know the most about. That's for sure.
But I wanted to mention, or I wanted to ask you rather, do you see a lot of overlap between like Lorcana, Star Wars Unlimited, and Magic players, or are they 3 completely different bases?
It's a great question.
That's the second great question I got. I feel like
a lot of great questions. This is a great question though, because it is something that is pretty telling and what I think makes some of them special. So Lorcana has, if you're talking about we have to kind of talk about the highest level and then the casual level.
Okay.
At the highest level, it seems like Lorcana has a lot of bleed over from Magic players.
Interesting.
However, at the lowest level, not so much. In fact, in the last 10 years, I have seen more females playing Lorcana than any other TCG combined.
Huh.
And it's fantastic to see. Not only that, but you also have some just non-traditional card players, like people who just you wouldn't expect to play card games as much. They play like board games and things like that, gravitate towards it. And you also see a lot of young people and their parents playing together, which you see sometimes with Pokemon, but you very rarely ever see that with Magic, right?
That is really fascinating.
Yeah, it's been crazy to see, and Lorcana's only been out for a year, but I've seen a lot of ladies stick with it and be very good at it and successful at it, where unfortunately, because of just the way that the Magic player base is, it's a lot tougher for ladies to get into it because it is just completely taken over by dudes.
It's not as
approachable
welcoming
for them and welcoming. Yeah,
it is interesting. I mean, I think that part of that has got to be just that it's a newer game, right? And Magic is so established.
I think that helps. Yeah,
part of it has got to be that, and obviously part of it is probably the IP as well.
The IP is absolutely what gets people in right off the bat.
That's really interesting.
With Star Wars, however, you're actually I am finding that you have a lot more board gamers and you have a lot more LCG players.
That's fascinating.
And I think that's the way it is nationwide. And it is kind of because it plays similar to a lot of the LCGs and the old Star Wars LCG and even the old Star Wars CCG. You kind of have this, I take an action, you take an action, I take an action, you take an action. It's more of a chess style thing, kind of think a few turns ahead. It doesn't quite play like Magic where you can, if I do a thing, then I'm immediately going to be able to respond before you can do anything else, kind of a thing. Or in Lorcana, you just take your turn. And you play your turn, you do everything out, and then you pass the turn, and they take their turn. it's not like you're just passing actions back and forth. So all the games are different in terms of the ones that we're talking about, at least. And I think that is reflected in the player base. And you have a lot of Magic players that I think will try out pretty much anything, though, at least once.
That is really interesting. No, so to me, like, and now bringing this back, a little closer back to board gaming, like, to me, like, I don't see any benefit in the collectible card gaming, like, distribution model. To me, like, I love the LCGs. Yeah, I'm gonna buy this. I've got all the cards, and I can play the game. Like, I have no interest in the collectability aspect of it. I have no interest in like chasing around different cards. Like, if I never would have played Magic ever if the LCG model existed then, which I think is living card game is a Fantasy Flight trademark.
They coined it, but we use it for a lot of different things.
Well, I mean, we use it
it's any card game that comes in the box, you get the whole thing.
Yeah, which is amazing to me. Like, just keep expanding it and giving me more, and I can buy it all. Like,
I'm the exact opposite.
Really?
Oh, absolutely.
Really? You like the collectibility?
I love the chase. I love to put stuff in binders. I like to have better stuff than you do.
That's funny. I
like to have spent more money on my thing, so my deck looks way better than yours.
But I think
why play with the same cards you play with when mine can be shinier and cooler and more expensive?
I'm learning a little bit about you right now.
It's a little bit of a flex.
Make a note on that.
Honestly, it is a big. And there's also just the gambling part of it. Honestly, people love to just
open the packs.
What do I get? And that you lose all that with all the other card games. Yes, they're great, and there's a game there, but there's a whole nother side of the game, and that's the excitement you get, and you get to spend your money, and you may make something out of it, you may not, but everything might be cool. I don't know what cards I'm going to see. Maybe I've never seen this card before. Maybe I've never seen this art before. I've got all these binders. Look at all this. Look, I've got this giant truckload of binders. And you flop them down on the table, you put it open, and everything shines, and you get blinded by all the foiling.
It's like the suitcase in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah, dude, I'm telling you.
So I remember buying like a booster box back when home in New York. I remember sitting on, like, we would sit on this grassy area in this park with the Hudson River and stuff, and it'd be nice, like, sunny day, and you just sit there. My buddy and I would split a box, and we would just be opening up the boosters and be like,
think about that, man.
What did I get?
You never lose that.
Which is kind of cool.
Honestly, I was always, man.
I understand the allure of that, but I think for me, I'm on the other end. Of that.
I totally get it, but there's an allure to it.
There is one, and this is the last thing I'll bring up about this, but the one cool thing about the collectability aspect was that recent story where they made the One Ring. Like a special Elvish with this only one of them, because there's only one ring.
That was a whole
$2 million. Yeah. Like, okay. So
I'm actually surprised it only went for.
It was like Charlie. So if you don't know this, it was like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Totally.
They put it in a pack, which is insane anyway. Like, how did they hide, like, okay, this one card going into the pack that nobody can see and then distribute? Like, it seems
they were
like
very careful about it. It was like they did it under like lock and key in the middle of a.
Would you watch a documentary on how the security measures they took?
Certainly, and I actually have an interesting story that we had to talk about. So, yes, this One Ring was out there, right? Yeah. Before it was found, there was about a week and a half where this Lord of the Rings set was coming out. Yeah. Me and the other owners had to literally sit down and say, okay, if this card is pulled in our store, what do we have? We had to have a contingency.
You had to have like a plan.
Well, think about it.
No, it makes complete sense.
If it's pulled, and everyone knows it, this person's life is now in danger.
It's because it ultimately sold for like $2 million.
Yes. Yeah. And everyone knew it was at least going to be $1 million card, right? Yeah. That person's life is in danger. Yeah. If we open it as a store, no one can know about it. No one can know about it because our shop will be an immediate target.
That's crazy.
Like, it was so big that we actually had to come up with a contingency plan ourselves, just in case.
So what's the plan? I want to know what the plan was.
So that was the plan was basically like.
Did you put like rocks? No, like when you're in the westerns and you're like, okay, here this rock is the.
No, the plan was essentially, I don't know if this is actually came up with it. It was more of a thing where, like, if a customer opens this, we need to essentially escort them out of the building.
And just be like, there you go, and then like the mobs
or like escort them home, or have, I don't know, call the police and have them police escort. I don't know, but it had to be something crazy. It was just like we had to think about it. Like it was just like, if this happens, we can't just have this person be like, I got the $1 million car. Like That's
Can you
pretty
imagine
dangerous.
the stupidity of announcing hey, I'm holding $1 million in my hand?
Of course you would do that. I would probably do it.
You wouldn't be able to.
Hell yeah, look at this.
Well, now I'm a little, because you were like, I want better stuff than you. Now I'm like, were you really going to escort this guy out, or did you have a plan to
That's the thing.
take this guy out and like?
And it would be like, okay, but not only can we take him out, but we probably have to film the whole thing just in case they say something happens.
Yeah, that's a lot of.
And never have we ever had to think about something like that before.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, that's probably how it went down. And then Post Malone bought it for $2 million.
That's crazy. I mean, to me, like, is there any amount of okay? What's the amount of money? Like, would you have considered keeping it at all?
Never.
Yeah. To me, like,
I wouldn't want it. I wouldn't want it.
I'd be like, however much, I don't care. It could be $10,000. There you go. It could be $5,000. It could be $1,000.
Well, I would find a best price for it.
Well, yes, but I'm just saying, like, even it was like $1,000. If it was the one of a kind Magic the Gathering card, somebody says $1,000.
I wouldn't want no one to know I had that thing.
Yeah, you'd keep it in the vault.
If I would have opened it, I would have told like maybe Mark, the owner at the store.
Yeah.
He might be the only person other than close family that I would even tell that it existed, and then I would get it sold, and I wouldn't have made it a big deal. I wouldn't have made it this big. Now, the guy who opened it, of course, it was a big story. Post Malone flew him out to L.A. or something, and he brought it. So, actually, no one knew he had it until he sent it to PSA, the grading company.
Yeah.
And then they kept it.
Yeah.
They kept it for him.
Crazy. That's a lot of trust as well.
Yeah, no doubt.
Okay, so let's move on to a local gaming con I went to, actually. And, it's a local called Tabletop Central. And I don't really go to a lot of conventions or whatever, but, it's kind of nice to hear about the Alliance Distributor Conference from you.
Yeah,
and, I always think it's funny, like, there's a friend of mine, he's older than I am, he's maybe 10 years older. And he calls, because I've been to hundreds of like cons, and this guy, not gaming cons, but he calls them, he's like, the conference. He calls it a conference.
The conference. What it is.
It's what con is short for, but I'm always like,
no one calls it
what are you,
that.
1,000 years old? What is this? Like,
the conference.
it's so funny, but
it's pretty much
yeah, it's kind of a neat little.
It's a convention.
Yeah. Oh, that's true, actually.
It's a convention.
Well,
I
think both actually kind of fit.
Conference would be like, I mean, all the things I'm going to are more of a conference.
Yeah.
I think the other ones are convention.
So, a nice little local con. I'll just say con to be.
There you go.
They had some neat things. They had a little painting table area. They had open play games. They had a gaming library of a couple hundred games. They had a silent auction for games. They had a raffle when you went in. You get a raffle ticket. And you got to pick, which is also a little interesting mini game. So let me ask you, there's like 20 games on the table. Okay, and they go around the table and they each have a little box. Do you put it in Star Wars Rebellion because it's a more expensive game, it's a more desirable game that you want, or do you pick the game that's not so popular because you think you might have a better chance of getting it, or do you pick like something that's got like the game and the expansion because that's a little better value? What do you think?
I mean, because there's probably enough of like as low of a chance that I would get the crappy one than the one I want, I'd just go with the one I want, just in case.
But it's fun. It's a little mini game. It's like like its own little mini game.
Yeah, I would go with the one I want because if it's a crappy game, then why would I even want it?
So this con, I mean, it's kind of like a thing where you think about like these big cons like Gen Con and stuff, and you went to Gen Con.
Yes, I did this
You
year.
said it's like 70,000 people a day. Or
it's more than that this time.
What did I think I said that really weird. I think it was 70,000 people a day.
Yeah.
70,000 people a day.
It was more than that this year.
Yeah,
it was like 80.
Okay.
Yeah, it was nuts.
To me, that's like so much. And like local.
It was a lot,
like
man.
4 hours from here, 2 hours from Indy or so, 4 hours from here, 5 hours.
Mm-hmm. Where was?
Origins,
yeah, sure.
And I'm like,
it's getting bigger
why
and
would
bigger.
you not go to something like that?
Well,
like,
it's getting bigger and bigger too.
Yeah. I don't, but like to me, like Gen Con, it has all the new games, all the, you can meet designers and things that you might be interested in meeting or
maybe
see those creative people and stuff, buy original art, whatever. But like
the art is great.
Like demoing the games is what I would think would be cool. But waiting on all the lines and all the people, that seems insane to me.
Well, with Gen Con this year, so we were on the ball this year.
Yeah.
Me and Mark both, and my girlfriend, we were all on the ball. We had our schedules all set up. 30 seconds after they opened all of the things we wanted to get into, which were just simply like, we want to play this board game, like a full version of this board game, and this board game, and this board game, and this board game. We got in none of them between the three of us. And there was more people, like 5 people. Mm-hmm. Nobody got into the board games because there's too many people.
Yeah.
There's not enough seats to sit down and play board games.
Seems crazy.
Honestly, I might have played one board game at that board game convention.
That's crazy. That's why. So this con is like it was like $25 for the whole weekend.
That's why this kind of thing is awesome.
Yeah, and you go in and like and part of the thing that I don't like about gaming conventions that I know of is like because there's another one, Winter War, here in town, and you have to like pay your way into all these different games. It just
they
seems
do a
like,
lot of miniature stuff too.
I'm not that into that.
Stuff,
but you go in and like I take the game off, they scan it, and I go play it. I don't have to like reserve times if I don't want to. I just go.
That's great.
And so for a person that wants
Really
to just play games, which is where I am, I'm a person that just likes to play games. That's like perfect, for me. And just all the other things. There's vendors there, but I feel bad for the vendors because I don't think anybody cared really. But people go there to play games. I don't think the vendors are really making a lot of money, and they didn't have very many vendors.
Yeah. Well, Gen Con kind of has that library thing. They usually do that in Lucas Oil Stadium, but even that has gotten so big. It's hard to even find table space there. They do the kind of thing that's kind of the library where you can check one out and just
scan
play
it
games. But they're all old games, right? Like they're
well,
not
they
the
have
stuff you want to play. Right?
Probably, yeah. There's no versus Gen Con. There's not like it's not like this is the hot games room. These are all the newest. But they did have a neat function where I saw some people playing this game. I think it was called like Botany. It was gorgeous. And
Botany's great.
And I was like, why is everybody playing this? And they had a thing where like, if you played it, you could win it. Like there was, and so those particular games got more plays. To me, like I do understand on the one hand, if it's a gaming convention in town, you could just play games with your friends if you're in town. So there's, so going to a convention where people from around the country
gives you a great reason to play them.
But yeah, it does. Yeah. So to me, like I'm like for $25, go for the weekend. It seems like a really cool thing. Now, what's hilarious, I mentioned before that I'm not a social, like I'm going to play with games with everybody. I have a whole thing about that. But I went to the thing and I ended up playing, my friend Jesse, I used to be on Co-op for Two a bunch with him. He has a channel there. But he had a table and stuff, but I haven't seen him really in like 10 months. I played any games with him in like 10 months. And we sat down and played a couple of games together, which is hilarious because I go to this gaming convention and I just play with the person that like I
only
play with. And you think that's good. Fantastic. I'll do even one better. He has a game, this huge game he's been working on for years, coding this whole thing. It's one of the most monumental efforts I've ever seen of a design. It's this whole like game, like this detective style game. And so I was like, oh, I'll try it, and I demoed it. So I sat there like as a solo player. Spread the game on this table and I was like looking through. So I played just that and that. So like it's kind of funny.
Played solo and with the guy already played.
It's mind-boggling. Like
I
think that might be the case. But yeah, it was kind of a neat little thing. And otherwise, speaking of local things, there was a large presence from Kudo, and I did go to this Kudo Plays one night thing. They do a whole thing. It's basically board game design. So I went to they kick off their season. So for the year, you go to this kickoff night. They explain what the program is about and stuff. And it's basically they help you to design a game, and everybody's kind of designing games, and then you can help other players and play test and things. And then by the end of the season, they give everybody kind of like, or they give awards for the best games and stuff. And it's just a way to like help get you to the finish line of designing your own game. Really kind of a cool thing. And I went to the opening and kickoff for that. You've been
really
before?
Cool. Not only have I been, like me and Mark have been kind of integral in doing some judging every now and then. We did a lot of the playtesting. Mark's done a lot more judging than I have. They get some kind of local board game enthusiasts as well as a lot of people who run some of the retail in town to be involved in judging and or playtesting.
Yeah.
And sometimes we would have they would have them come to our shop and they would throw out a few games that they were trying to build up and make better. And I think it's really, not only is it just a great organization because it's just cool because they're kind of helping people, use their brains and, get to fabrication laboratories and do stuff like that to, they give you all kinds of resources. But they also are just like, it's just a cool concept. It's kind of unique thing that we have here in town. So, yeah, I love to see it.
It's it's a neat thing. To me personally, it's a different side of gaming though. Like to me, like playtesting, forget it. That is not interesting to me at all. Like and I know there's people that love it.
I agree. Playtesting is tough for me. For sure.
I think it's like there's this.
Some people do love it.
There's this emo Phillips joke he has where he's like I once did this like this insanely selfish act where I put premium gasoline into my rental car, which it's kind of makes you think of that. Like,
that feels a bit like
it's
that.
Like it's like you're doing this great thing, but it's not for me.
It's taxing.
Yeah.
No doubt.
All right, so let's move on to a few questions we've got from our little mailbag here.
Sweet.
Sadie says, what are some good party games you can recommend for more casual play? And can you recommend any games that don't require a lot of strategy or planning? Do you want to give it a stab, or you want me to
Giving
go
this to the game store guy, I'll take it.
You'll take it? Yeah, go for it. That's like a shoe. That's like...
I have like 50
like,
of them. I'm only going to give you a couple here, but
okay.
All right. So it was party games, and so one of my favorite party games, and one that we sell a ton of, and we just think is fantastic.
I'm sorry. I gotta stop real quick because we have another question very along the same line, so we can kind of put them
give both.
We've got Sten who says, picks for party games or with novice board gamers. Like, how do I get my girlfriend to like board games?
Sure.
So those are the two. You can see they're tied in. So.
Sure. So generally, when you're talking about party games, you want something that plays more than 4. You want 5, 6, 7. You want to try to get as high as you can with it still being a fun game where people are just sitting around waiting for the next person to take their turn. One of my favorite games for this is a game called We're Doomed. And it is a very simple game that plays in exactly 15 minutes. And you know this because you actually have a 15-minute sand timer that comes with the game. You flip it over. That starts the game. The idea of it is there is a giant meteor that is going to destroy the Earth in 15 minutes. And you have the box of the game sits in the middle. It's called the Project. And what happens is everyone can take their turn. Once everyone has taken their turn, you draw a card. Your turns consist of very simple. Maybe I'll take 2 points or 2 coins and I'll keep them here. Maybe I'll steal coins from somebody. Maybe I'll take an influence because the object of the game is to build this rocket in this project here to get everybody off of the Earth before the 15 minutes runs out. And everyone is doing this cooperatively, sort of, because I can put some money into the thing at the end of the round. You might put some in, but whoever puts the most in gets one of these influence tokens. Once you get these influence tokens, that's the person who gets the first seat on the rocket if it's built. Now, that sounds sort of fun, right? That is not what makes the game fun at all. There is a deck of cards in this game. You flip the deck over, and whoever put the most money in just reads off a card. And keep in mind, the entire time you're doing this, the time is running out, right? You take the card, and you're going to read it, and it's going to be something ridiculous happens, okay? Maybe it is a card that says, place the card on the table and put your finger on the button. If your finger ever leaves this button, you are immediately nuked out of the game.
So
stuff like that.
This game, which is interesting, because I'm not unconvinced that there's not some huge stockpile of this game in your store, because every single person at your store loves this game.
It is.
I did not enjoy it myself. I actually played it with.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, you tried. It wasn't for me. I'm just teasing. I know you don't really.
Sure.
But it's like everybody at your shop is either on the same exact wavelength, but it's a little bit take that.
It is. Well, it's not. What happens is the cards that come out make it very fun.
Yeah.
It even tells you never shuffle this deck. So every time you play it, you're playing from the top of the deck, maybe doing something different that you did the next time. The reason I know that it is a very, very good party game is because we'll take it to a bar and we'll teach 10 people to play at once. And by the end of the game, most of them are rip-roaring laughing. And if you can get a game with 10 people where everyone is moving quickly, it forces you to move quickly, laughing about the game, doing a little bit of take that here and there, but really, you're supposed to work together in order to build the rocket here, but it never works out that way because you always want to kind of maybe do a take that and whatnot. Now, so, we did just say that you're not really that great in groups of random people, so that's probably how that worked out.
Yeah, that's actually
trust me, guys, it's a great game.
Yeah. Well, let me say
it's a
this
great party game
about that party game thing. So I think games that don't require a lot of planning and setup was the question, and the other one was partly are there good party games, and then how do I get my girlfriend in, or non-gamer people, and they're kind of in the same general question. Now this is party games are games that do not require a lot of setup.
They should be, they should be inherent in what they are.
Party games kind of have three things, right? Very quick to learn, very simple, and fast to play, right?
Because they don't take very long.
Right. And so there's a lot of fantastic party games, and I should probably do a ranking. Maybe I'll do one soon on the channel.
No doubt.
Of the best 10 party games. But games like Telestrations are very good.
Sure.
Codenames, very popular. A lot of games tend to be vocabulary based, which you don't particularly like. But there are also games like Junkyard, that are kind of dexterity based kind of games. Herd Mentality is another very simple one that's good.
For sure.
Like I said, most party games, don't require a lot of setup and don't have a lot of rules by nature because they're going to get people that are not generally gamers. Yeah. So there's a few games that can be good. And as for like the girlfriend that's not as really into it, you know, you can't, I mean, and this is my own opinion, but you can't force somebody into a game that doesn't want to play.
Sure.
You know, and you know, with my wife, you know, I occasionally will play something with her, and you know, I'll be like, hey, do you want to play this kind of a game? You know, maybe it's a theme that she's not interested in the game, and she'll say no, and I'm like, well, you know what, that's okay, because I'm not going to make you play this game because there's 1,000 other games that I own, you know, that you can play something else. So I think you got to be careful about, don't be pushy, don't push your hobby on somebody because they're definitely not going to want to join.
In terms of answer the question about the girlfriend or someone who's not, doesn't play a lot of games, I think what you really need to find is something that is fun and funny and gets everybody kind of laughing and involved without any rules almost. You know, so there's a reason that the game Cards Against Humanity sold more copies than anything ever. It's not even a game. Okay, there's no game there. It's just a bunch of cards with words on it. But it gets people engaged and it gets people having fun and laughing and gets to show weird sides of themselves. And so that game was popular because of that. This is not an endorsement of that game, by the way. I don't think it's that good of a game. But it is good at what it does. It gets people laughing. It gets people involved. There are a couple games like that. A couple other ones that I would mention that I think might be great. Go ahead.
I wanted to, before we get too far from Cards Against Humanity, this is just a little sidebar. But I played that with a group one time. It was, again, not a really, like, there were some gamers, some non-gamers, and I was just at this kind of party. So I'll play. But it ended up being in a group of, and there was someone there, this girl, that she hated me. Something about me really pisses people off sometimes. This girl did not like me at all. And so I wasn't, you know, and like I won, like, you know, because you win, everybody puts their thing in blind, and everybody picks the blind not knowing whose it is.
Right.
And so I like won, and I was like, okay, and I could tell she was kind of annoyed, but I wasn't rude I wasn't, you know, like, hey, I won, you know, I'm just like, okay, cool, yeah, thank you, you know, and I just kept winning like an excessive amount. And I was like, and I was kind of like, you know, don't don't look at me because I could just feel the rage coming off of her. It's really kind of funny. Yeah. But again, I was very respectful. I didn't want to like make anybody unhappy or anything. And I'm, you know, but I'm just like, okay, thank you, you know. But I was just like, sorry, I don't know what to do. Like I have no control over this.
But as long as people are laughing and having a good time, the game is fine. But it is that type of game that you want to find to get them into games. Although I will say you do want some rules and you do want a little bit more, you know, complexity in there at least to get them used to playing a little bit better games. You're really trying to introduce them into the hobby. But that's a tough thing to do regardless.
So what you had a couple?
A couple more that I would suggest. Wavelength is one. It's kind of a game where you use a dial to kind of figure out the extremes for two different words that are similar. And it's one that like you actually do get on each other's wavelength for each person on each other team. It's really interesting. That's definitely one to go out.
There's another similar game to that. It's a similar kind of concept or feeling, at least, as hues versus cues.
Yes,
kind of similar. Like it's all based on like colors, but you kind of trying to get people to get the same kind of...
to choose what colors that you're kind of thinking or where you're supposed to be at on the thing. So that's another big one.
Yeah, let's move on. So Gavin says, what are some games that are simple to learn but surprisingly fun and challenging for competitors?
Competitors? Interesting.
I've got one if you want to.
You go first.
So I think probably the biggest game that I can think of that is both approachable, like a simple game, but tends to lead to competition, and literally competition, because I think it's one of in the World Board Game Competition, which is a very small convention that they have somewhere in Pennsylvania. It's Ticket to Ride. I think Ticket to Ride is a
great one.
Sold millions of copies. It's very approachable, very easy to learn, but it can be very cutthroat. I think once you learn how to play, it's a cutthroat game.
It's all about blocking routes.
Yeah, and you know that game also has a lot of expansions and things to keep kind of growing, but. You know, I'm not a really big fan of it, but it's a huge game. It's very simple. You know, I mean, you know, chess obviously is the original. You know, is simple to learn, hard to master. And then you know, Carcassonne is kind of the same kind of way. It's easy to learn. It's a gateway game.
Yeah.
But you can be kind of cutthroat with that as well, which is another good option. And again, one that has lots of expansions. I think these gateway games tend to be like, come in, buy this game, and then we're going to add the stuff there. So.
Yeah. I would say maybe in that same kind of weight of game, Splendor is not really like a hugely competitive game.
Yeah.
It kind of is. You have to pretty much be paying attention to who needs what on their kind of tableau that they're building, and it's extremely easy to learn the game. It's very fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's as challenging for competitors per se, but it is a good game for even the last question we were talking about, like just getting people into learning a game. It's a very simple concept. It doesn't take very long, and it's really fun. But this one is definitely like simple to learn and just easy to play, really fun.
So Gavin also asked, what is the minimum amount of equipment to be a board game? Does there need to be a board? Example are cars games that don't use a standard deck, like Exploding Kittens or that French Revolution guillotine game board games. So are they board games? So
It's a great question.
you want
Another
to?
great
You're going to.
Look,
I don't like that you're giving this a great question because you've given me great questions.
Yeah,
it's diluting my. My point.
I haven't. The reason I keep saying that is I haven't actually been. I haven't. Read any of these
you're going in
questions
blind.
Yet, so I'm going in blind.
Yeah.
I honestly, in my own mind, and being in this industry so long, like I consider everything a board game.
Yeah.
Not everything. Like a puzzle is not a board game. A miniatures game like Warhammer, that's not a board game. But you do kind of play it on a board, and you also do kind of play with miniatures, and there are other board games that have miniatures. So there's a lot of crossover.
Yeah.
There are trading card games. I would say collectible card games are not board games. That might just be the only qualifier I need.
Yeah, I think I personally. So there's two sides of this question. Like I think on one side it's the concept of like what constitutes a board game. Somebody might say that's a miniatures game, as you kind of we're mentioning here, or is this a card game? Is this a miniatures game? Is this a board game? I think you probably should we as gamers, because there's been so much crossover, as you said, and I think like the best games being made now, because before you could divide things out even more and say this is Ameritrash or this is a Euro game, and now the best games are these Frankenstein games that are taking for a little bit from everything.
Elements of everything.
And so I think that it's like if it was a movie, it'd be genre bending, and I think those are some of the best movies being made, are the genre bending movies. And I think this as a hobby, I would love it if we were to get away from board games as saying this is a board game, to just having the whole thing just be tabletop.
Tabletop.
Right? Yeah. It's a
tabletop's great. Games. Yeah.
Right?
Well, that
encompasses miniatures, because X-Wing, the miniatures game, it feels like a board game.
It's kind of like a board game. It's on the tabletop.
I mean, it's not as complicated as most war games are. Nowhere near as but it's kind of technically a war game, and it says miniatures game in the title. So I kind of tend to think of that.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to kind of do an all-encompassing way to do it. But it's tough to say.
So the other side of the question here is the minimum amount of equipment. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Now again, to be fair, you've gone in blind to these questions, but you're doing fantastic. But I had a little time to take a moment to try.
What do they mean by equipment, I guess?
So, I was going to mention that there are some interesting little games. I mean, of course, card games like trick-taking games.
Sure.
Very few little, and now interesting. There's these. Have you seen the Paco games? Yeah, Paco game. It's these little gum packs. It's like a pack of gum, and then you take the pieces out.
You got a game in there.
So you can play, and it's like a whole series. It's a whole series of games, and that's kind of like if you're at a restaurant or if like you're online for the supermarket, you can kind of play these. I mean, as if you needed to play that much more. There's a lot of interesting. We mentioned X-Wing. There's a game that had like these called Regatta. It was like these little tiny wooden ships. Really nice little ships. There was like 4 of them, and then cards, and it kind of, you put them and move the ship to the end of the card, and you would just use any old table. So I think that's really interesting. And then there's another little game called Sail to India. My friend Kat many years ago went to join the Peace Corps, and she really loved games. And I remember I tried to find the smallest games I could.
Yeah,
I gave her Tichu,
like in a card size.
Yeah, Tichu is a great trick taker that's very popular with people. That's an easy to learn, hard to master game. That would be good for the other question. But there's a lot of game in that box, because there's people that just, the only game they play is Tichu. And then I gave her Sail to India, which is kind of a big board game tucked into a small box, which is kind of an interesting thing. So it's kind of interesting to think about these big, but we as gamers, we like the big productions. I love the art on the board. I love the whole thing. So I think we generally tend to like a larger.
Sometimes, it depends on the setting. I think, that whole awesome giant board thing, like I play those, less than a lot of other things, right? Because you got to block out a Saturday sometimes to play those, and you got to get a group.
Yeah.
I also really enjoy games that come in a box this big, and that you could take to a bar.
Yeah.
Or you could take to after dinner. I call them after dinner games when I'm selling. I don't call them bar games.
Yeah.
To the mom who's trying to pick them up or whatever. But I'll call them after dinner games because that you've still got your you got your family still at the dinner table. Well, you're not going to bring out freaking Scythe or Agricola. You're going to want to set some cards down and deal them out, or you want some small miniatures where you're just moving around. So, different settings, really, I think does make a difference.
All right, so we got one more question here. This is from Dimitri. I've recently noticed some popular crowdfunding of role-playing game versions of popular board games, Root, for example. So this is kind of an interesting one also. You care to...
Sure, yeah. It's definitely true. It is very cheap to make a role-playing game. I think this is kind of me just shoot from the hip there, but it is very easy to make a role-playing game off of an IP. Like we were talking about the art earlier. The art of a game. If you have all of the art already, making a role-playing game system, you can kind of paste a theme on there whenever you want, and you can kind of create a book. And just making a book with the art you already have, I think is relatively cheap. That might be why we're seeing it happen a lot. That, as well as a lot of these board games that are coming up with their RP versions of them, they just happen to be really cool, and I think there was probably a lot of demand to maybe delve deeper into the world of the games that they have. So they're not wrong. I mean, it is definitely something that I've been seeing a lot more, probably seeing in the last year, honestly.
I think in general it's interesting because Dungeons & Dragons, we mentioned earlier this episode, that it's bigger than it's ever been, right? And there's a lot of people that are playing that game. And, is it that they are so excited about the D&D setting, or is it that they're excited because people are playing it and it's a role-playing game? Well, now, Dungeons & Dragons spends tons of money making small games to get you into this. There was that Neverwinter game that came out last year. That seemed completely made to dip your toes and understand the concepts of playing that game, and hopefully the next step would be to do that. And then there was the series of game, the Castle Ravenloft, Wrath of Ashardalon, all that kind of stuff that gets you into it. And then you're like, well, by the way, you can use these miniatures in this box to start your D&D campaign. So I could see there's a lot of ways that they're trying to get you into that. And so it's not impossible or it's natural to see it going the other way as well. Hey, we got a popular game. Gloomhaven is huge. Root is huge. As you say, you can reuse the art and stuff, and essentially you're just selling a book, maybe some dice. Yeah,
you're selling the writing.
You put those, and you get somebody to write up a system, and you already have the skeleton for many games. What people most probably want is not to have to learn a whole complicated system, but they really just want a different setting, right?
There's another thing to it.
Yeah, let's hear it.
That I've been seeing a lot recently, and that is you will create your setting and theme, and you just put on the side of the book 5e compatible.
Yes.
So you are literally just you can have any setting now with you just use those D&D rules you already know with your group, but now you can play it in this type of world. My favorite RP thing of all time is from Monty Cook Games. It's called Numenera, and I won't go into it because it's we could literally talk about it for 3.5 hours. But it had all its own world and everything, and its own system. However, this year at Gen Con, all of the books they now have a companion book that is 5e.
Oh, yeah.
So it's all the interesting monsters they've made and interesting things, and in-universe stuff, they also now have a 5e version of it. And so you're seeing that a lot more, where you can create this, you don't even have to reinvent the wheel. You don't even have to reinvent your own system. You just put a bunch of cool content, use 5e rules, and there you go.
So it's interesting. That's a really fascinating bit here, and I want to kind of talk about this just for a moment, because on first blush you could think hey, that's kind of naughty, because you're saying, look, use this other person's system that they came up with, but here's my stuff to go on, just to go on top of it. So you could see that maybe that's a little impolite, but on the other hand, I mean, the customer is well serviced by that, because you're hey, I know this already, now I can try this other thing. But there is a little hidden symbiotic relationship part to it, because this other, because 5th edition, if you want to play that game, you'll have to go get their product to play it, right? And I think that, and you'll probably buy dice and paints and miniatures.
Yeah, all the things that you would buy for a D&D.
For a D&D. So, I think it just...
You probably have all those books already, most likely.
I used to... So back home when I was in New York, I used to swing dance. We used to go every Thursday night, or what, West Coast swing we would do. And I remember, there was some competing nights that kind of popped up, and I asked the guy, because there was one guy that kind of ran our little our group or whatever. He was our instructor, and I was like, how do you feel about these other nights? And he's like, it's great. He said it just grows the community.
People do it
makes
more
people learning to dance because they have all these other outlets.
Sure.
So I think it's kind of like everybody wins. There's more. There's just it's like a cornucopia of.
Honestly, in the game store community, people are like, well, how many game stores do you have in town? And it's like, how do you like those guys over there? You have 5 game stores in town. That's nuts. And we always say, like, look, honestly, like, the community, the industry, all this stuff, it's big enough to support multiple things, and we just have to do things well enough where we can get people to come to our nights, and if people are doing them in other nights too, they're just still doing the things that they love.
Yeah.
So we don't hate that kind of thing. I think it's the same kind of way with Wizards of the Coast. I mean, they say, look, if you're going to pay us a bunch of extra money just to put that it's 5e compatible.
So you think the companies are paying to put the 5e compatible?
They absolutely have to.
I see. That makes sense.
In fact, this is probably something for a whole nother pod.
Yeah.
But there's this thing that they kept bringing up at the Alliance game convention we went to, where they call it the kerfuffle. Okay, and that's how they say it. There's a company called Cobalt Press, and they would do a lot of 5th edition companion stuff. But their stuff was loosely based around a lot of the stuff D&D did, as well as they kind of branded themselves as a supplement to 5th edition books.
I see.
Well, Wizards of the Coast did not like that, and there was a lot of legal this, that, and the other.
See.
I don't know all of the things that went into it. I just know that there were a lot of small companies who were making their own stuff on the back of D&D, basically.
I think I heard about a little bit of this.
Where eventually D&D was like, no one's doing this anymore. Without paying us.
I did hear this, actually.
And they wanted to get paid a lot.
Yeah.
And so they called that the kerfuffle. And so a lot of companies that were doing this went off and had to do their own system. Were not able to just slap on 5e anymore.
So you could see where some universal kind of system could develop, and all of these games could benefit from it, type of thing.
That is basically it's D&D.
Okay, so let's talk about. We're getting on a time here, so I want to talk about a few games each, and then we'll close it out. So, would you like to start us off?
Sure. Is games we played before? Played recently?
Played recent plays, yeah.
Cool. Okay. Let's see. I think one of my favorite games that we have kind of brought to the table recently, and this is one I actually played at Alliance. It's called Compile. It's a very small game that's kind of all like in this box, and we were talking about like what makes a board game. Like this thing is just a bunch of cards, right? And it kind of feels like I'm a TCG player. I'll fully admit it. It kind of scratches that itch, but for you who likes to have all the stuff in one box, it's all in there. It's a really beautiful game, and it's extremely cheap. Like, I'm not going to say exactly how much stuff is. It doesn't really matter to me all that much when we're talking about the stuff on the pod. But it feels like there's a lot of game there. Basically, it's got 2 parts to the game. You'll draft these small decks. So, like, I'll draft 1, you'll draft 2, I'll draft 2, and you'll draft 1. So now we have three decks each.
Full deck.
So each deck is only 6 cards.
Okay.
So you end up with a deck of 18 cards.
Okay.
And you have these 3 rows that you're playing on. Now, the short and long of the game is you're trying to play cards out in certain places to get enough points to compile 2 out of the 3 lines that you're playing. Now, that doesn't sound like it's too crazy, but there's a million different things that each of these types of decks do, whether it be moving stuff around, giving you chances to draw, giving you chances to flip cards over and move stuff kind of like, in different rows you might need, maybe shut off some stuff that they're doing. And then one of the things you have to do is when you have 10 points accumulated, you must compile your game. So the other opponent can say, well, you have 10 there. I really need to stop you. Okay, I'm going to use this thing that takes one of your cards away. Now you don't have 10 anymore.
Okay.
Or if you have 10 there, but I'm about to win here because I only need 2 more turns, I'll let you compile there. Now that's all you can do on your turn. Now I have a whole other turn to do this. I've set up the strategy to win. There's a ton of strategy in this game. The game looks amazing. It is a 2-player game.
Just 2 only, okay.
Yeah. 2-player only. It has like 18 different decks of 6 cards in there.
What's the
different
theme
stuff.
Exactly?
The theme is you are AIs, believe it or not. And you are compiling different types of prompts.
Yeah.
The prompts are the decks, and the decks are things like water, darkness, metal, soul, just all these random things, but all of the decks do different things. And the interesting thing about the game is you're drafting them, right? So they're all going to be synergized differently every time you play. So
Interesting.
very, very cool game, and I would definitely recommend that one.
So I just played Redwood. Have you tried this one?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Love
really
that
beautiful
game.
thing. So
Really cool game.
Yeah, it's a very simple game, and it could be a great party game actually because, there's a lot of like bonus points and things and rulings that you have to keep track of, which kind of keeps it out of that realm. But essentially, the game is like you set it up, and it's the forest with these animals and these flowers and sequoias, and you put the whole game is you pick up a movement tool. Once you pick one up, you're done. You're locked, and then you pick up another tool and they're both transparencies, and one of them is to move, and you'll hook it onto you have two miniatures. You'll hook it on one, and then you'll follow it to the end and put your other miniature there. Take your first miniature off, and that's where you've moved to, and then you have like a little transparency that you'll click into your miniature, and these are different shapes. So there'll be like a long, thin one, there'll be a wide one, like a wide angle lens, and these are supposed to be like different cameras, and you'll be able to take anything in that you're covering is something you're taking a picture of, and you'll get these little panoramic cards, and you'll be filling them up with things like animals and things, and you get points for all sorts of different ways. But the game is basically like spatial recognition. Like, I think I should pick this and this because that's how I'm going to be able to take pictures that I want. So the game is really easy to understand. It's pretty quick to play. I think if it was longer to play, it would be kind of crazy. I think it also seems like there's a team game for 4 players. I think that sounds insane to me. I've not played it above, in the 3 or 4 player capacity, but also there's a solo playthrough on the channel I've done. But it's one of the loveliest productions I've ever seen, and I really love the fact that we talked about X-Wing the miniatures game.
Yeah, it scratches that itch for sure.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing because instead of moving your ship and then seeing if you can shoot, it's the opposite. It's like kind of like this is, a very fascinating game to see these wargaming mechanisms done as,
a cozy game.
A cozy or a nice game.
Yeah.
And I love the theme of this game. I like the idea. I love all sorts of different things.
Beautiful game.
So I also just played Parks recently, so I guess I've been in that kind of mode this week of like cozy game nature mode. So next up for you. Sorry, do you want to say anything about that, Redwood? Or?
I think you pretty much covered it. Yeah, I was going to mention that. Yeah, it's kind of scratches that itch. I think the developers definitely did some X-Wing or miniatures style stuff. They kind of brought it to a game.
I would love to see more of that. Now, there's something.
I think
I have a whole topic, and I want to save it for another cast at some point because it's just the idea of like there's a lot of things you get in miniature and wargaming of like painting and building these displays and stuff. I would love to see that go in like kind of like, okay, I'm making farms and I'm making these. I would love to see that, but that's that's a conversation for another cast. So your next team?
Yeah, so this one came out about, I would say, maybe 3 months ago. It's a huge seller because of its name, but it's also amazing. Wormspan actually is kind of the spiritual successor to Wingspan, and it is, instead of birds, we have dragons or worms or whatever with a Y. It's fantastic. If you're a person who's played any Wingspan but has not tried this game yet, it's always kind of interesting to see who likes which one better. And what's your answer? My answer is actually Wormspan. I think it adds some. Some elements that make the beginning of the game very interesting. It loses the element of rolling the dice for resources and adds a little bit more interesting way to gather resources, which is basically you're kind of delving into these caves first to gather resources early, which are they're almost always available, so you can kind of go whichever way you want as opposed to rolling dice and choosing them and kind of vying for them with everyone's kind of trying to take them at the same time. There's also this guild track that they don't have in the other one that kind of is, as you're moving along, you're kind of getting these benefits that will get you kind of where you might want to be. So you can see a few turns ahead. Okay, maybe if I can get that, I'll gain some extra, the extra resources I need to get more of my worms out. It does feel like there's a little bit difference in that it doesn't feel like there's as much cascading effects. You've played both of these games.
No, I've not played Wormspan. I've played Wingspan.
Well, if you've played Wingspan, you know that there are times when there are these cascading effects that happen. And the cascading effects are what kind of make the game interesting and how it's going to be different every game. When you put your birds in a row, they might be doing all these effects. There is a lot of that in Wormspan as well, and it just kind of feels like they're there in a different way, which is pretty cool.
So someone over the weekend, actually, I was chatting with, not in a board gaming capacity, it was just a completely other capacity, which is interesting, but she was telling me all the, like, she was like, look, if you don't like Wingspan, this is the game for you. And a lot of things she was listing sounded interesting to me, but the thing is, to me, like, the most interesting thing about Wingspan is the fact that, like, it's just decks and decks of all these birds, and I get to look at the birds, learn about birds. I love that. But to me, like, I'm in the
mind. You get to learn about dragons.
Yeah, but it's not a real. To me, like, I like.
Well, they still have it in there.
Yeah, I mean, I like dragons and stuff, but I think that's really the biggest appeal of Wingspan.
It does make Wingspan very unique.
But I am completely in the minority on this. But Wingspan, Earth, Terraforming Mars, Ark Nova, these are all games that share this very similar mechanism of, like, here's a huge deck of cards, and to me, I'm like, cool, I played this, that'll synergize with another one, and then I never draw that other one.
See it, yeah.
And that's not for me. I like a tighter game. I like to see my options. I like to be able to take my options on the board. And this style of game, super popular right now, just not my cup of tea. I don't dislike Wingspan. I think it's on the shorter end, whereas, like, like Terraforming Mars is, like, super long. It's not really for me. But to me, like, that. But it loses the one thing that I think I really love is that Wingspan.
I think you would like Wormspan a little better than Wingspan in that case.
Yeah.
I think that the things that you're doing aren't all kind of reliant on having a singular strategy in each row.
Interesting.
And there are other ways to score points than there are in the Wingspan game.
Those little eggs, you get those little eggs. They're beautiful.
Yeah, the eggs look great in this one too.
Oh, do they? The little dragon eggs? That's awesome.
They're also in there. Yeah. Very good.
Next up I've got is Rune Master. This is a little game. Actually, I saw it advertised somewhere, and we talked last episode about, like, where we get our information for games and stuff. And I've become much more of I see it and I'm like, all right, I'll try it. But this one I saw a little bit of buzz about, and so I thought I'd check it out. It's very similar to two of my all-time favorite games, which is Last Bastions / Ghost Stories. This is like a tower defense. There's monsters coming at you, and you're rolling dice, and you have asymmetrical characters who are fighting off this invading, force. It's very quick, like, the turns go by very quick, and it's pretty simple to play, set up, and learn. So I think, and it's very anti-quarterbacking. So, like, if that's something it's cooperative, I should say. So if you're, if you don't like that, it's pretty good for all those fronts. However, you roll dice to determine all of your actions, and your dice will choose. You can, in order to move to certain locations, you need the red symbol to move to this location, and if you're in that location, then you can fight the monsters there. You need the green symbol to move to the green location and fight the monsters there. And then each of the monsters has, like, an assortment of symbols they need to be defeated. The problem is, if you roll your symbols and you're like, oh cool, I can kill the monster over there, but I can't get there. Or I can get there, but I can't quite kill the monster. But
null turns, yeah.
And so it leads to a lot of empty turns. Now, I mean, if you're playing, like, 4 players, your turn is moving by pretty quickly. But it sucks to be like, oh well, I'm done. I can't do anything. And so that's very frustrating. I think generally in games now, I know Final Girl is very popular, but I find, like, that game, is one of those where, like, that's when I first kind of really was like, okay, this is I was able to put my finger on this concept of, like, sure, let me roll some dice to see whether I succeed or not, but let me always move to where I want to move, And I think, like it's hard to plan, and it's hard, you know what I mean? I think moving in games should almost always be like, look, I can always move, and maybe you can't quite get to where you wanted to get or whatever, but you can plan, like, okay,
moving forward, doing something.
Yeah. But, like, never ever have it be like you have to roll your dice to move. And I think Final Girl's where I really got that in my head, where I was like, yeah, this is not for me. Not being able to just move when I want to move. So, it's quick to play. So, there is that, but it does seem a little swingy. I mean, although it is interesting to play, so I don't think it's a bad game, but it definitely, to me, like, it's the same exact sort of time span, time length and game style as two of my all-time favorite games. So it's hard to imagine me kind of going after that one.
No, try it, man.
Yeah.
Cool.
Next.
Am I doing another one? Yeah.
Yeah. Do one
cool.
more.
So this is one that I got a chance to finally try. I was very interested, and I'll preface this with, I think you play a decent amount of solo games, right?
Mostly now. Yeah.
I play almost none, and I don't really enjoy them because if I have free time, it ain't gonna be playing board games unless someone else is playing with me. I'll do video games or something because I'm always around them, right? Yeah. So. However, this one is very interesting. It's called, it's a version of Gloomhaven, believe it or not.
Interesting.
Called Buttons and Bugs.
Oh, yeah, I've heard about this, yeah.
It was fascinating.
So I'm sorry. Before you go on, did you play this at Alliance or did you buy this?
I got a chance to play it at Alliance. I had already bought it.
You own? Oh, it's out now. I didn't notice that.
It is out now.
Okay, good. Let's go on my
I
list.
had already bought it. However, I hadn't opened it, and I also didn't even recognize that it was a solo game when I bought it, and sold it to a bunch of people. Unfortunately, I had no idea this thing was a solo game. I just thought it was a miniature version of Gloomhaven, which I think would also be awesome. Now, you can play it cooperatively with other people.
Okay.
Like it doesn't have to be a solo game.
Sure. Okay.
But it's not going to be, it won't be a great game to play with multiple people. 2 people may work okay. The game is amazing. We were talking earlier about kind of what makes a board game. Does it have to be a giant box? Does it have to be, is a little box like this okay? The box is this big, but there's a ton of game there. The miniatures are the smallest miniatures you've ever seen. They are this big.
Have you played Seven Continent?
I don't think so.
They're tiny. They're like 15 millimeter or something.
I bet these are smaller. They're the smallest miniatures I've ever seen. It's hard to pick them up with you gotta pinch them.
You gotta give them a paint job.
You gotta pinch them. Yeah. It'd be really fun to paint. It wouldn't take very long. But there's a single card, like a standard size card, that is the entire board for each of the scenarios. And there are small little sections on each board. And then there is a deck of cards that will. Have you played Gloomhaven?
I've only played one time. I've actually made an entire 3D modular way of having a full.
Interesting. Okay.
I've done all the work and never played it. It's ridiculous.
Well, the biggest reason that I bring it up is, in Gloomhaven you have a giant book that's giving you a whole thing. Well, this is, you flip a card over and it's giving you the scenario. And you read out the whole scenario, and then you have the board here. And then it's how you set up the bad guys. And then the bad guy, you go find the bad guy in the box, and the bad guy comes out, and then you've got your bad guys set up here. You know what their HP is, their attack strength,
scenarios?
And all that. I don't know. A lot.
A lot?
A lot, though.
Campaign?
I'm going to guess... Yeah, it's a campaign.
No way.
I'm going to guess it's probably 20 scenarios, maybe more. I don't know. There's a lot of cards in the box.
You said you didn't open your copy yet?
I haven't opened my copy.
And you don't want it? I'll buy it.
It.
Oh, you want it?
Yeah.
All right.
We have it at Titan Games.
Right.
Come by.
You do?
Yeah,
okay, I'll definitely come get it.
Come by for the shop. Yeah, I want mine. I just don't play solo games that much. If there was any I would play, this is the biggest reason I have this on my list.
That's interesting.
This game really piqued my interest early. The tiny miniatures is just so awesome, and the fact that they fit on the whole scenario is on one card is just super cool for me. I think more companies should do this.
Yeah.
Production cost has got to be really low. Just make your scenario games super tiny. Yeah. I could play this in the back of a car in a car ride, dude. Yeah, it'd be so much fun. So that one is really cool. Basically, in the demo, I just got to sit down and play one scenario, and it was really just the brigands show up, fight.
Okay, let me. I got a question for you now. So, you played Gloomhaven?
Oh yeah.
Okay. So, if I came up to you and I was like, "Look, I want you to play this game. I want you to try this game," and I set up buttons. Buttons and bugs. Is that what I said?
Buttons and bugs. I think.
And you play it. Afterwards, we're chatting. Do you say to me "Hey, that game really reminds me of Gloomhaven," or do you think, without having it suggested to you, you would never have thought of it?
It does remind me of Gloomhaven.
Okay.
The way it's set up in the scenarios.
Okay.
Because in Gloomhaven, you have to set up a scenario, and it takes a little bit, to set it up. You go through the book, and you got to pull the bad guys who are going to be in the scenario out. You got to set up the map, the places that you can find stuff and whatever, and it tells you how to set it up. And then you're moving around and doing. The cards are there too, just like in Gloomhaven. It's okay, I'm going to play this card here, and that's the one that does that, and then I'll play the bottom of this card here, and now I've got my 2 actions. Those are my 2 actions for the turn. The same thing you're playing in Gloomhaven is there. You're just doing it solo, and you're doing it on a tiny scale. I think it's absolutely genius. But yes, anyone who had played Gloomhaven, if you didn't tell them that was a Gloomhaven game, they'd be like, that reminded me of Gloomhaven almost exclusively.
Okay, that's really fascinating.
It's very, very interesting. I almost wish it wasn't a solo game because I want to play with lots of people in a tiny form on at a bar or something, or the back of a car. Who knows? That's
interesting.
Yeah, it's great.
Okay, well, I mentioned I'm gonna do parks because I just kind of started talking about that, and it's we're kind of short on time, so I wanted to. But this game is gorgeous. I mean, it is so beautiful, and often when I talk about my thoughts on games, and this is probably 5 or 6 years old now, but I love to be inspired by games, and when I play this game and I look at it, I'm like,
you want to go hiking?
I want to go hiking.
Yeah.
and I want to go to the national parks, and I'm like ready to look up like what's the best way to go to all the national parks. I'm like, I want to buy those posters to put in my house so that I have no room for posters, because like it's really lovely, and it really gives you that sense of, it's a nice game, but also I think it could be a little cutthroat, and I've only played this one solo actually, and it has a nice little solo system. It's very easy to follow. I think it's, you play against these rangers, and they move, and they can move 1, 2, or 3, so they're not like can't just move anywhere. But you can kind of like game and try to figure out where they might move, and much like you would with another player. Like, okay, well, I think my other player's going to take that, and then there's like a little system of where it can fill up on these events can fill up if they collect these tokens, and so they'll have some negative events on you. So the solo thing is very easy to play. It's very quick to play, and I think it feels pretty close to what you might play playing an actual another player. It's a pretty quick game to play. You're essentially visiting national parks since you're collecting different resources. The theme in one way isn't there very strong because the actions you're taking, it's kind of like a race game. It's one of those, it's a very popular mechanism that I actually really like, which is like, you can go all the way to the end if you want. But or you could try to stop at each one, but then if somebody goes ahead, they'll close out the round. Right. So it's very interesting. And really, like a really lovely little experience.
Have you played Trails?
I've not. That's a 2-player only. I should try that out.
Yeah.
I actually just read.
It's really good. It's actually, I think it's 2 or 3.
Okay, yeah. Well, I saw it there, and it
really
was a
great.
little confusing.
It's a bit of a like pared down version.
Yeah. So it is a little confusing because like I know there were Parks has a bunch of expansions and a couple of expansions which I just ordered as well, by the way, and they have and Trails is next to it, and I was like, wait, what is it? So and they have such a similar look that like I think it got me a little confused, but I was like, okay, similar. Trails is similar. But yeah, really got fun little game. Really enjoyed.
Love that one.
Just very briefly, anything you're looking forward to?
Oh man, in gaming, I don't know. You want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Yeah, you go first.
So I was in the shop and I saw my favorite gaming experience of all time was Pandemic Legacy, which is a game designed by Matt Leacock and Rob Daviau. And I was in the shop and I don't know. I think I must have heard about this, but I didn't realize it was. I don't know. It all came together. And I'm like, Ziggurat is there, and it's like.
Yeah,
it's a legacy game
back out,
by those two designers, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm like, that's amazing, and I think it's more geared towards kids or families. It's not quite as
It seemed based on the art. That's kind of how I've seen it. It looks like it. Yeah, might be. They're trying to make it a little more approachable.
Yeah,
but
it's awesome. Like you're saying, like, hey, this is the creative team that brought you your favorite movie of all time. Yeah. Okay, let's take it. Let's do it. So I'm very excited about that.
That's
and
awesome.
Then the other one, real fast, is that. I like Marvel Crisis Protocol. I'm a big comic book fan, lifelong comic book fan. In that game, they have the best miniatures. I mean, the miniatures are amazing of these characters. I know I was in, and Apocalypse is coming out, and he's like really big. He
better
large.
be. Yeah,
and he looks very cool. And I'm like, I gotta get Apocalypse. So probably by the time this airs, I will have painted up my Apocalypse.
Do you have Thanos?
I do, yeah.
I was going to say if you don't,
I've got almost. Well, I've got the vast majority of them, which is silly because I don't really play that game, but I do like. I guess it's fun to make the models and stuff.
Very
but
cool.
Anything for you? Or?
Yeah, so there's a couple games that I really want to play. They're not like brand new came out. One of them is. One of them is called Arcs, and it is a game that has gotten a ton of acclaim this year. And it's kind of, if you're familiar with the massive game Twilight. Wait, what is it?
Root.
Yeah, it's kind of like Root.
It is by the
same. No, it's by the same people who did Root. But what am I? Twilight Imperium.
Yeah.
Twilight Imperium is a massive game. This is a game that's going to take you 6 hours to play. You're going to block an entire Saturday to do it. Arcs is kind of a pared down version of that, but it's apparently has fixed a lot of the mechanics in that make that kind of a slog. And have kind of sped it up and made it really fun. If you really want to play a big board game, but you don't want to play for 6 hours, you want to play for maybe 2 hours. Apparently, this game is awesome. It's very hard to get your hands on.
You guys have a copy.
We only got copies because we did the super duper Kickstarter.
I see.
Like the retail version of the super duper Kickstarter. So we keep getting a few copies from our Springfield store every now and then, but it's really hard to order. So. That game I really want, however, I'm not going to get it because I want to let our people in our community get it before I can.
So before you go too far, I think that was the most hyped game at Gen Con. Would you agree?
It was definitely super hype. Yeah, it sold out every single day or really early. But yeah, it was very big, and I do think it's going to be pretty awesome. Yeah, it's the same people that do that.
So for me, I think that like those style of games like Root, etc., like are super. Like you got to have 4 people. They all know their roles. They play the. I mean, this really
one is not as asymmetrical as Root. It is more of a area control kind of game, but it's in the same vein where each of the factions do stuff differently.
And you know this is like a board gamer promise from like decades worth, which is like, hey. Do you want? I mean, it's like the oldest thing in the book is like, hey, do you like Twilight Imperium, but you'd like it to be faster?
Yes.
Try Eclipse. Try like Proxima.
Yes, and all of those games are still extremely long.
Yeah.
Apparently, this one has boiled it down just a bit.
Interesting.
I know. So that one is interesting. And then, have you ever played any of the Undaunted games?
Yeah, actually, I almost brought it up. That was on my list, but we were running a little long.
Interesting. Okay, well, the other one I'm interested in is the Callisto version. Yeah. It is the newest version of it, and it is a sci-fi version, which scratches my itch a little more than like the old school war version. So that one I really want to get my hands on because it looks amazing.
Yeah, that's interesting because to me, like World War II is very fascinating, and
I think it is too. I love World War II. I just don't want to play games in it. I don't want to either be Nazis or someone else. I'd rather be I want to stay as far away from Nazis as I possibly can. So
I think in general that's a pretty good heuristic.
I hope so.
Stay away from Nazis.
I don't really want to have to be them in any game.
Yeah. So. I think that's a good way to end it. If you've learned nothing from this podcast, stay away from Nazis.
Yes, stay away from them and don't be them.
Well, thanks for joining us, Dan. Thanks for being here the last couple episodes, and we'll have you back at some point. I hope you'll come back on. But for now, I gotta roll.